boy. So when I saw on the schedule I was following Sarah, I was like, oh boy. She's a tough act to follow, and wow, did she deliver, huh? She was great. So in any event, my name's Mike Volpe. I am the CEO of Lola.com, and what I'm here to talk to you about is sort of the 4 different hats that people operations or great HR people need to wear. And this is from my experience helping to build the culture at HubSpot, the culture that we're trying to build at Lola.com, and just working a lot with that aspect of things within companies. So I think the first thing to sort of note is that a great chief people officer makes their company a magnet for game-changing talent. And the way you do that is, and the reason I use that word magnet is for a couple reasons. Number one is you want the culture of the company and the company to be able to attract awesome people. You want people walking around in whatever city you're located in saying like, oh, someday I hope to work for that company. Or somebody says, oh, I have an interview at XYZ company, and somebody else tells them, oh, I've heard that's a really good place to work, right? That's what you want. So it attracts people. But the second thing you want it to do is to actually like retain them, right? So when something's like stuck to a magnet, it's a little hard to like pull it away. You want that same force to be happening within your company. The third thing that happens is, have you ever seen one of those magnets where it's like there's like paper clips and stuff stuck to it, and then there's like other paper clips actually not stuck to the magnet, but they're stuck to a paper clip that's stuck to the magnet, right? You want that. You want the actual employees that are working at the company to be like pulling other people in as well. So it's not just about, you know, the recruiting team and things like that, but it's about this like extended network that happens. Partners of the company helping to pull people in, things like that. So it's that, those are really the effects that you're going for. Now here's the problem. All of you, all of us who try to work on this issue for our company, the issue is that there are a lot of things to juggle, right? How many of you feel like you're juggling like 4, 5, 6 different things? Yeah, exactly, right? I didn't even finish that question. You're all like, oh my God, exactly, right? And most of the time, you've got a very small team. So I don't necessarily have any solutions for that, but I do think what you can do is break down like what are those different batons that we should be juggling, and have an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish in each area. And then I think there's people in other aspects of your company, other parts of the company, that you can actually partner with. And we're going to talk about that a little bit to get some more leverage, because oftentimes all of you have very, very small teams. Or in fact, I think a lot of you might even be a team of 1, right? Many, yeah, seeing some hands go up. Great. Okay. So the 4 things that I'm going to talk about that you all need to juggle all relate to different parts of the company, but from a culture and a culture building and employee engagement perspective. So the first thing you need to juggle is culture and building the culture, right? And I equate that to basically product management. So the product, when you're recruiting and hiring and working with talent, the product that you're selling is the culture of the company. And what are the things that you need to do if you're going to think like product management when you're building the cultural product of your company? The first thing you need to think about is like, what's your target market, right? What is the product? How is it different? What features will it not have? Things like that, right? So take an example of, let's say, Southwest Airlines at the time that they got started versus every other airline in the world, right? Southwest was phenomenally different, and they went after a certain segment of the market. But there were also things that were like, it wasn't like everything was better about Southwest, right? It was cheap, and there were a lot of advantages to it. They flew into airports that didn't have great service compared to the, you know, maybe mainstream city airports back when they first got started. But there were a bunch of things that weren't as good about it, right? Like much lower on food and drinks, right, compared to the traditional airlines at the time. You had to probably, if you're making like longer flights, you probably had a lot more connections. The whole boarding process is like a gigantic like cattle call and like kind of a disaster, exactly, right? So there were a bunch of things about it that weren't as good. But they picked a couple things, and they said, okay, for people that live in more remote cities, and especially they got started in Texas, it was like there was a lot of flying within Texas because it's a very big state. Like, we're going to solve that problem, and that means there's things we're not going to do. Culture's the exact same thing. I think a lot of us are in this sort of, frankly, never-ending and sort of race toward all having 100% the most amazing benefits in culture in every possible direction. And that's kind of a fool's errand. I think it's important to sit down and take a step back and say, okay, like, we're not going to beat our competition on every single dimension. We need to align and say, here's the type of people that we want within this company, and here are the benefits benefits and culture and aspects of our culture where we can be way better than the competition, and then it's okay to be worse than the competition in other areas. Because none of us can afford to pay for the absolute best benefits on every possible dimension, unless you're some giant company that's printing money like Google, right? But the rest of us can't do that. And the other thing you can't do is like have a culture that necessarily serves like every single possible person in the world, right? Like if you want, Sarah was just talking about bias for action. If you want bias for action, there's going to be people that are uncomfortable with that as a culture, right? And so you just need to embrace the fact that you want bias for action, and that's going to be great for some people and not great for other people. So if you think like a product manager and understand like what your unique selling proposition is, your USP, and design your culture and your benefits and that whole system around that kind of a theory, I think you can make a lot of progress. One of the things that's been interesting for me, I joined Lola just as CEO about not even 2 months ago. We have extremely good benefits, really, really, really good benefits. And so we don't actually have a lot of room to like add other new benefits. We're a small company, we're 45 people. We pay 100% of health care on a plan that is a PPO and has only a $1,000 deductible. We have 401k, we match up to 5% of salary. We pay up to $250 a month of commuter benefit. It's like all that's like bang, bang, bang. It's like really, really, really expensive. And so one of the things I'm at least starting to do is figure out how do we like market those better. But it's really interesting because those benefits are very, very good, but I don't know that they're necessarily aligned with like the unique aspects of our culture. So one of the things we're starting to spend some time on is make sure that like, okay, well, what are the unique aspects of our culture and are our benefits aligned with that? All right, so in fact, I'll give you one example of aligning your benefits with your culture uniquely. So one of the things we wanted to have at HubSpot was a culture that was about learning and personal development. And so we said, oh, well, all these tech companies have free beer, right? And it was actually Dharmesh that came up with the idea of like, well, we have free beer, sure, but we also have free books. And you're like, what's that? And that means that any employee who wants a book about anything, the company will just buy it for you. I can't tell you how little money that actually cost the company, but how far it actually got us in terms of marketing and be able to talk about that as a benefit. As soon as you tell people you have free books, they're like, that's interesting, no other company has free books. Why do you have free books? You're like, well, because we believe in employees, and you give you an opportunity to talk about that aspect of your culture. So think about little things like that could be really interesting to like align that culture with what you're really trying to do. All right, now the thing that you need to balance and juggle, right, is employment branding. And I would argue that's very similar to marketing. So just like you should partner with product management, get a bunch of advice from the product managers within your company, get a lot of advice and help from the marketing department on things like employment branding. And so let's talk about that. So when you're thinking like marketing, you want to figure out how do you want to reach people? Who should you be targeting? Make sure that's aligned with the people that you think are aligned with your culture. How do you leverage paid, owned, and earned media? We should talk about that in a minute. And what do you measure, too? That's also important, right? So if you want to recruit real all-stars, you want to figure out a way to like get them to like beat a path to your door. And the best way to do that, and the best way to hit all your hiring goals, is not to hire it's really expensive to hire outside recruiters. It's very time consuming, even if you have an in-house recruiting team, for them to be doing all this cold outreach on LinkedIn. It's much better if all their cold outreach is getting a better response rate because people have heard of you as a company and understand what you stand for culturally, or if you've got a bigger inbound flow of interesting candidates coming in. So a lot of the ways that you need to do that is it's fundamentally just a marketing problem. And I think your marketing teams can really help you with that a ton. One of the things we have started to do at Lola.com that we did a ton of at HubSpot as well was think of everything to do with our culture and our people as a marketing opportunity. So if employees were getting together and doing something fun and interesting, take a bunch of photos of it and push that out into social media. Give employees lots of reasons to share more with their friends through their own social networks. So we did a good job of enabling all the employees to want to be very active on social media. Use them as another marketing channel. Do things like basically talk about your own culture as if it was like your own product of your company, because in many ways, in terms of people operations, it is. So we would take literally every opportunity that there's something to do with the culture, we would use it as a marketing opportunity. All right, the third thing that you need to balance and juggle is around recruiting, right? And this is fundamentally a sales problem. So you're trying to connect with people, you're trying to figure out if they're the right fit. Just like sales, actually, if you're a good sales rep, you're trying to figure out if the person on the other side of the table is actually a good fit to become a customer. If they're going to become a happy customer, you're not trying to sell to every single person. And you're also trying to figure out how to convince them to become a customer if you decide that they are a good fit. So that's fundamentally a sales problem. Sales is mostly about discipline and metrics, as well as figuring out what your pitch is. So the things there that I would talk about, and I would partner with your sales team on this, like get a lot of advice and coaching and help from them. You can probably borrow a lot of their playbooks and things like that too. But figure out like how are you managing the candidate experience? So once they first start interacting with your recruiting team, what are you doing there to make it, in the case of sales, it's an awesome customer experience. In the case of people, it's an awesome candidate experience. What's your sales pitch? What are your funnel metrics? This is one area where I feel like most people within recruiting don't do an awesome job of tracking their metrics in terms of how many inbound candidates you're getting, how many outbound candidates you're reaching out to, what are the response rates from each of those two channels, how many people are coming in, what are the conversion rates from phone screen to in-person interviews to offers to people actually joining the company and accepted offers. There's a ton of metrics that you can track there, and I think if you do all that stuff, you'll have better success over time because you know where to focus. And if you were to take that set of metrics, those recruiting metrics, and show them to your marketing team, they would actually probably have a bunch of ideas of marketing-related things that you might be able to change at each of the steps. So I think the real power from a lot of this stuff is enabling and empowering all of you to have a sense that like there's a whole company there that can actually help you do your jobs, you can leverage, and they're probably actually really interested in it because everyone wants to work at a great company that has great people. And if you position this as a way for them to help you get more awesome people into the company, I think a lot of the most active and most interested employees and most dedicated employees would be willing to help. All right, you want to hear what the final one is? Yeah. All right, so employee engagement, this is a big one. And this is basically like if you have a customer service or a customer success team within your company, this is how they think. So what they want to know is once sales close a deal, so marketing brings them in, right? So product builds the product, marketing helps bring people in, sales helps work people through the sales process and close them, and then your customer success team is the ones responsible for making them happy. So what they want to know is what are the expectations the customer has at the very beginning when they first sign up? What's the onboarding process, right? So there's customer onboarding, there's also employee onboarding. How do you intervene if there's problems? How do you get data about if they're having problems, right? One of the things that I found can be tremendously helpful, and I think most of you are TINYpulse customers, but to get feedback early on in the employee experience is really, really valuable because it gives you an opportunity to change things, and it gives you an opportunity to save things. If you learn that an employee isn't super happy like 90 or 100 days in, you've got a gigantic problem because it's almost impossible to turn that situation around. If you find out within a week that something was off with their onboarding process and joining the company, you have a huge opportunity to actually save that and rectify that situation and also ensure it doesn't happen again. So how do you measure employee happiness? How do you get more positive reviews on places like Glassdoor and things like that? These are all things that a good customer success team thinks about, right? And the way that they approach these problems, the way that they instrument, probably using Net Promoter Score and things like that, the customer experience, both overall and with every individual interaction that they're having with them, that same mindset, then that same mentality can be applied to the employee experience as well. And this is where there's actually some great tools now. I've been a TINYpulse customer for, I don't know, a really long time. And it really delivers on a lot of these things. I've had a ton of success with it with a lot of my teams. Awesome. All right. So remember, the 4 things you're basically trying to juggle is essentially like the entire company. I hate to I hate to make you all feel like, oh wow, let's end the conference with this thing about like how much work we have to do and how we're taking on the burden of the entire company. But I'll reposition it a little bit for you. It's like you're basically all like chief people officers, right? And you're CEOs of people is the way I would think about it, right? So just like a CEO has to run the entire company and think about product and marketing and sales and customer success, you need to think about all those things with relation to like the company's most valuable asset, which is the people. So you can see it as a giant burden, or you can see it as this like tremendous opportunity to act like and think like a CEO for the people portion of your businesses. Sound like fun? Yeah, awesome, cool. All right, so here's where I will say thank you very much. Lolo.com, we do business travel. That's all I'm going to say about that. We have phenomenal reviews, lots of really happy customers. If you guys are ever thinking about a business travel app for your companies, definitely check it out. But it's been tremendous to be with you all today. Thank you very much.
All right, great stuff. So got some questions in Slido. So the first one is, Mike, did you find success getting employees to bring work into their personal social media? If not, how? In all caps. I can't get my people to tweet for anything.
Oh, it's so hard. So it's interesting. So at HubSpot, the benefit there was it was a company full of like marketing people. And even the people that didn't work in the marketing group were kind of very marketing minded because we sold marketing software to marketers. So I will absolutely admit that it was a much lower bar, like much easier to do there. But I'll talk in a second about some of the things that we did. After HubSpot, I worked at a company called CyberReason, which is enterprise cybersecurity software. It was much harder, much harder to get cybersecurity people to like post anything on social media to begin with, and then to post anything about like their job on social media. That was also really hard. So I would say some of the tips, so it's definitely like there's easier environments and harder environments depending on the type of employees and what industry you're in and kind of what the culture is. But I think what I have found doesn't necessarily work is like tell people to do it. What I have found work is show people how to do it and show people that it's cool and show people that it can be fun. And so things like having a few people that you think are willing to do it and enabling them with maybe a hashtag like, TINYpulse Life or something like that, where it's related to the company, but it's kind of like a little bit different of a sub-brand. That could be something. I've also known some companies where they've decided Instagram is maybe not important for them for business purposes, but it could be used only for recruiting. And then they've got maybe an Instagram account that is, life@lola.com or something like that. And then you can actually go around and obviously get people's permission, but like take the photos and post them and things like that, and then try to get all the employees at least to follow that account. And as you start to get that, then hopefully they'll start to like things, maybe repost some things like that. So it's definitely a little hard to do, but I would try to embrace the employees that are already doing some of it already, try to empower them more, try to give a little bit of a platform for some of that content to help it spread a little bit more by maybe having a company account that's purely about culture, things like that. But it can be hard within certain companies for sure.
Yeah. So with the audience here, we have CEOs, directors, and HR leaders. And one of the questions was, what's the best way to draw and leverage other leaders into the recruiting and hiring process?
Like you think this means like other people, like if I'm
get them engaged. Like if they don't really believe like they should be all in on this, is what I'm assuming this question is about.
Wow. Well, that's problematic. Right? Like I think so to me, I think the smart CEOs and smart members of executive teams know that hiring is like the most important thing you do. In fact, a CEO that I worked for about 18 years ago, who's still a mentor to me, he used to say specifically that. One of the key things he said, like as he was wandering the halls and talking to people, is like hiring is one of the most important things we do. And you need to really adopt that mindset. And I think if people don't have that mindset, then I think you need to sit down with them and say, like, hiring is one of the most important things we do. We need to be spending more time on it. I will say a lot of times people give lip service to that, and they'll say hiring is the most important thing we do, right? And then if you ask them, like, well, how much time did you spend on LinkedIn sourcing more candidates this week? How many hours did you spend in the last 2 weeks, like, selling candidates that we were trying to get and things like that? A lot of times people pay lip service to it, but they're actually putting their time against it. I think it's important to, like, encourage people to put their time against the things that they say are really important.
Yeah, excellent. And you share that the 4 quadrants around culture, product, branding, marketing, recruiting, sales, engagement, CS. And this question is, if we don't do any of these 4, where do we start? Is this in chronological order or prioritized for us?
It's like we're not doing any. I mean, to me, I think you're probably going to start with like the product, the thing itself, like the thing that you're marketing to people. So I would probably start with doing a good job of like defining what the company culture is, and on that, remember that like it's really easy now to like just pull like the best aspects of every single company's culture. I think the right way to do it, everyone wants like, a culture that's entrepreneurial and like embraces employees, but has, great benefits and, lots of diversity and like all those kind of buzzwords that we use now. I think it's more important that you figure out like within all the possible cultural aspects, like what is your unique combination going to be and how can that be a different place to work than your competition? But I would probably start right there in the blue square with culture.
With the culture. Got it. Oh, that's great. And then this one was around, there seems like there's a lot of funnel metrics. What if we get pushback from HR that isn't used to this new approach?
Just tell them they're wrong. I'll admit, like I started, so my first job out of college was in investment banking, and I lived in Excel for about 80 hours a week. And then I worked in marketing for a couple decades. And so the combination of Excel and investment banking and marketing leads me to be definitely like a very funnel and metrics-driven person. But I do believe that if you have any sort of a process, whether it's a manufacturing process or a hiring process or a sales and marketing process, measuring those processes, like there's different steps and what the conversion rates are among them, is a great way to understand them better. So I guess you would want to understand like what is the pushback and the reasons why. And I think it's also important to say that like the metrics alone don't tell you the whole story, right? So looking at the metrics, you might say, oh, the conversion rate right here is really low. Well, that actually could be okay. Like, it's not like every metric you want it to be really high, especially when it comes to recruiting. Like, you might say like, oh, well, actually, we're okay with, and our desired conversion rate from phone screen to in-person might only be 15% or something, right? And you say, wow, that sounds really low. But you know what? You're saying, well, we're actually going to phone screen a lot of people because we want to give a whole bunch of diverse candidates a shot. So we're going to phone screen way more. And we know that we're just going to, because we're doing so much more phone screening, because we're making diversity hiring a priority, that we're going to end up with a lower conversion rate to the on-site interviews. Maybe that's fine. So it's not like every metric needs to be as high as possible. I think maybe a lot of times that's the pushback, is like they're going to be like, you're going to grind on them to like drive up the metrics. It's more about understanding it and having like a desired goal for each of the stages, and just understanding the whole process and the whole system. And I think it's really impossible to understand what's happening in your whole recruiting side of your business unless you're really, or at least measuring it so you can look at the numbers and how they're changing.
And on that note, what would you say prioritizing the top 2 or 3 metrics on the HR side that they should be the top of the funnel, like or the bottom, or like if you had to prioritize like 2, which one would you choose and why?
If I had to prioritize 2, boy. I would probably try to look at, I'm going to cheat and make it more than 2. I would probably try to look at multiple different sources, and I would want to see like number of candidates and hire rate from, inbound applications, from job board postings, inbound applications off the website, job board postings, any like outreach that you're doing with recruiting, and then maybe through any outside recruiters that you're paying on retainer or something like that, and just see like what the volume looks like and what the hire rate is. Probably those. You could go to cost per hire too, maybe, if I was going to throw one more in, but yeah, something like that maybe.
Well, that's excellent. And since you were the CMO at HubSpot, what was like one clever way? There's multiple threads about like, hey, I can't get my people to get active on social media. So you said like, hey, HubSpot Life, or can you remember one good concrete example that you folks came up together that actually worked extremely well at branding and bringing in applicants? Or at any of the other stops?
I mean, we did all kinds of things. We were early on the recruiting bonus, the referral bonus train. That's much more common now. There's actually a tool called Drafted that you can use, that we're using at Lola.com, that allows you to connect your employees' LinkedIn networks and have your recruiters be able to see within those networks, like that. Things like that, and doing more of the referral stuff, I think, helps. One thing we used to do was, let's say I was looking for like a director of demand generation in marketing. I would partner with my HR business partner, and she would maybe say, oh, we're really coming up dry in candidates. This search has been out there for a little while. What do you think we should do? And I'd put my marketing hat on, and I'd say, okay, well, what's the profile of the person I want to hire for director of demand generation? I was like, well, we threw out a bunch of things. I was like, yeah, they probably want to be CMO someday. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Maybe I should have a panel discussion with how to become CMO someday. No, literally as the topic. I'll invite like 2 of my CMO friends, and we'll invite like 100 people from the Boston area, and probably a lot of them want to be CMO someday, and that's at least one of the criteria I'm looking for in this person I'm trying to hire. And then we had 2 or 3 of our recruiters come and like network throughout that whole event and chat with people and sort of figure things out. And of course, we had the list of everyone that registered, and it uncovered a bunch of really interesting candidates that maybe wouldn't necessarily like applied, or even maybe we wouldn't have necessarily found if we were doing like a bunch of outreach. So don't be afraid to like, first, you're not going to do that for every single hire, but for really important ones, or if you're making a lot of a certain type of hire, do things like that. We used to have a lot of like sales mixers and things like that in the office.
Well, that's a super clever idea. I love that. And then on that note, have you actually ever put sales reps on sourcing good people before?
Booked them? What do you mean? Like,
I think it means right now some people have folks in the HR discipline sourcing.
Oh, yeah.
What about putting a salesperson who's in the doing a lot of that sourcing?
I think it's interesting. I mean, I think the best recruiters are trained like and act like a really good sales rep. And by that, I don't mean the slick back used car sales rep. I mean the really good, no, seriously, there's a different, right? A really good consultative sales rep that the customer ends up really trusting to help them make the right decision. Because the best salespeople in the world will also like tell a customer, like, I actually don't think this is a really good fit for you, and we probably shouldn't spend any more time together, because I don't think a year from now when you're a customer, you're going to be super happy with what we can do, because we're meant for somebody else. We don't solve the problem that you have. But the best sales reps in the world will say things like that, and I actually think the best recruiters will say things like that too, and be able to sort of be someone's trusted advisor in their career process.
Yeah, last year we had on stage Scott Dorsey, the former CEO of ExactTarget, and he was mentioning that his HR function actually had marketing embedded in it so that they can evangelize. And one of the questions was about, and you talked about getting marketing involved as well. So I'm curious, like, how do you envision that partnership between HR and marketing? Because when he talked about it, there's a ton of questions, and I'm sure there's probably still a lot of questions here.
Yeah, I think that I think a lot of it depends on the company culture of whether it's like a partnership model where HR is seeking out help from all these other parts of the organization, or whether it's sort of like an in-house model where maybe you hire, an employment brand ambassador or something like that, which is basically like a marketer but underneath the HR team. I've seen it work either way. At Cybereason, we actually had somebody within the HR team who was responsible for basically the marketing of the culture and would do stuff both internally but also externally. At HubSpot for a long time, for the many, first 4, 5, 6 years, it was basically the marketing team helping the HR team out on those types of things. But then as the company grew, the people operations team, so Katie Barker and her team actually have people that do the marketing of the culture now. Because what ended up happening was like, they had so much work that they needed done, they were unable to sort of beg, borrow, and steal it from the core marketing team, because guess who's beating up the core marketing team all day long? It's like, the executive team and the sales team, because we need more leads, we need to hit the number and things like that. So as they had more and more work that they had to do, they ended up hiring. So we sort of had tried both models at HubSpot. When we were small, it was kind of a borrow some resources. When it was big, it was dedicated. Cybereason, we had dedicated. I think it depends on the culture of the company and whether, like, how much headcount you have available too.
Got it. So last 2 questions is, one, this is very tactical. What's the most revealing interview question when you hire people, or maybe your favorite go-to one?
I've got a lot. Some of it depends. One I'm really big into right now is what are you most proud of having done? And then related to that is like, what's the hardest thing you've had to do? And I've had people tell me all kinds of crazy things. And because you can answer that question in so many different ways, right? A lot of people go to like some project where they like crush their metrics or something else. I had a guy tell me, it was funny, I'm sitting there, we're just chatting. I guess it wasn't funny, but it was interesting. And he's like, coming out to my dad. And I was like, okay, tell me more about that. And he had this really, really interesting story. It was just, I don't know, I felt like I really got to understand him and really see his soul. And then other people just like tell me some other story about like some new product that they launched and how they crushed their sales goals. I'm like, well, okay, that's cool too. It's one of those things where it gives people an opportunity to really share something about themselves. It can be professional, it can be personal, whatever, that they feel like really showcases something interesting about themselves. And I find it interesting too, because a lot of times people are, if they're really proud of like an individual achievement, that's kind of a little bit of flag for me. If they're really proud of something that's more of a team-based achievement, that's kind of like more of a positive sign. There's lots of little things that I think you can learn from that kind of a question.
So you care less about what they say, but more about the significance and if it's
kind of like, well,
individual
why are they proud of that, right?
Got it.
Like you have to like take the step back, and you're like, okay, well, why are they proud of that? And then you can be like, oh, well, they're super motivated by, money and finances and financial gain. You're like, okay, well, is that the right kind of person for the role that you're hiring for in the company that you have? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, right? Maybe they're super motivated. Maybe they even tell you about something that like didn't go very well, but they're really proud about how they held the team together through this like terrible experience of launching this product that flopped. Well, that tells you something of what kind of person they are, right? So you got to take the step back of like, why did they pick that thing, and what was it about that thing that made them proud about it?
Got it. And last question, I really like this one. What would you consider a minimal viable product for these 4 quadrants? I think you said start with the product, right? And there's a lot in product, right? But what would be the MVP to get momentum off the ground?
I think so in the blue square, it would be like it's a one-page written document, no images, no nothing else, that probably highlights 3 to 5 aspects of your culture. With like a 2-word phrase that describes them and like a sentence that goes into more detail. That plus maybe a couple specific examples of like of the hard choices that those things make you make, right? Because I think a lot of the stuff is you can be kind of, mom and apple pie and everything's nice, but an example of a person who's great that you wouldn't hire because they don't fit with your culture, things like that. So a little bit there, because that helps bring it to life for people. So that would be probably the MVP there. Employment branding would be like a really simple couple pages on your website probably to start. Maybe, and from there you can do like maybe a video and some photos and like some social media stuff. Recruiting sales, I mean, that's someone doing some of that, right? And then employee engagement, you didn't ask me this to pump you up, but I will. I mean, TINYpulse, the whole tiny concept is interesting because it's a really, really lightweight, fast, easy way to do things. That's probably like, it does way more than MVP, but the easiest thing to do is just like start using that for the employee experience. Awesome. And I know, and we didn't even talk about this at all. So, yeah.
Do you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, that's it. It's been awesome to be here. I love the energy in this room.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Volpe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.